Yes, it looks like I'm live. Well, hi again, and welcome to Coffee with Craig again. Yesterday, I made a broadcast and I made some predictions and so forth, but I want to just elaborate a little bit today on one of the things that I briefly mentioned and give you some of my thoughts about this, and that is the future of digital ID technology. We've seen recently, here in the UK anyway, we've seen two sort of senior politicians from the past, Tony Blair and William Hague, both making a call for digital ID technology. Obviously, somebody's probably prompting them because there's probably many people that are wanting this in the political world. And is this a dystopian idea, or is it a way to a safer society? And what does the future hold for digital ID? So I'm going to address some of these ideas today and take some of your questions at the end. Well, hi again, everyone. Thanks for joining me. I see you all coming on live now as we do this first live broadcast. But I would be very grateful for anybody at any point you come into this to give us your comments, your thoughts, because this, I think, is an important topic, perhaps one of the most important sort of topics that we can address in the digital age. So if you're coming in, I'm talking about the digital ID and digital ID technology, and whether it is a dystopian concept or whether it's something that could help us, and what's the future of this thing. Well, first and foremost, let's think about what are they talking about at the moment? What sort of information could something like this contain? What would a government want to see in a digital ID? It'd be a sort of like a passport, really. It would have perhaps our driving license in there, maybe our qualifications, maybe our tax records, and maybe even our right to work status, wouldn't it? These are all things that the government has access at the moment. Bring it all together in one digital ID. Now, this, on some levels, might sound like quite a sensible idea, but how far could it go? And is this kind of like the thin end of the wedge? You know, what's your thoughts about this already? What do you think? And what other stuff could go on there, though? What about medical records? It would be useful if someone had to have an emergency blood transfusion and they immediately knew what blood group you were. It would be very useful for someone like my grandson who has as a type 1 diabetic, where they might need to know that instantly, or know the records of his insulin use over a period of time. We could perhaps carry things like that. But then medical records, who would get information? Who would get access to this information? What about insurance companies? They'd love to have that sort of information, know whether we're worth insuring or not, know if we've had a period of cancer or something like that would kind of make us not such a good bet for them, because they're basically insurance. It's corporate betting, isn't it, in a way? And what about your records of COVID vaccinations? Could they be carried on a digital ID? You see, so this is where we start to get a little bit concerned, because how much information and what information do you think should be put on something like this if it ever came to something ever in the future? There's going to be huge resistance, of course, to this, but I think it's going to be a big debate over the coming months. And now this has been kind of thrown in the fire, certainly here in the UK. But it wouldn't surprise me this is something kind of worldwide, you know, because the world's changing. It's clear to me that the politicians have just not caught up with the digital age. I mean, I wrote to a number of politicians in the past, actually, at the early days of the internet when it was all starting, and expressing my concerns. I wrote to the European Union, I wrote to senior politicians and got replies, but they had no idea. they had no idea. This is right back in the early 1990s, in the 1990s, because I got online very, very early with the internet. I was there with, I mean, I thought it was absolutely, I'm going off from the script, but I thought it was absolutely marvelous thing. And I particularly liked Timothy Leary at that time, who was one of the first to get his website up there and was raving about the idea that, you know, this is going to be the movement of consciousness for the future. Yeah, and I played into that too, and still do, and think that it can be a tremendous power for good. But also we're seeing the dangers of it as well. Sathya Sai Baba said we shouldn't go on the internet. The internet is a dangerous thing, you know. So there's many ways of looking at this. So digital ID, the problem is once it gets into the hands of governments, it could lead to so many more other things, such as digital currency. I mean, Jane and I will almost deliberately try to use cash wherever we can, because I'm so resistant to the idea of everything being done with a credit card. You know, would you like automatically a service charge to be added to your tip? 15 quid service charge. Would I normally have given 15 quid service charge when you've gone out for a meal? You know, these sort of things, sneaky ways of controlling you, but dangerous if they could, if we had that, I feel, because digital currencies means the ability to switch someone off permanently. You know, if you had that, isn't this cashless society idea, you could stop a credit card, you wouldn't be able to buy anything, even travel to another location. No phone, no nothing. You lose your phone, you've had it, you know. So there's other dangers there with this reliance on technology, and perhaps digital IDs are just one more step in this direction. Trudeau in Canada did it, didn't he? He switched off the truckers when the truckers were doing those protests in Canada not that long ago. He switched off their access to their bank accounts. So it shows what can happen. So this is obviously going to be something, you know, going to be important in the future, but actually we do need something like this, and we do need something like this quite urgently, really. I mean, Tony Blair, you think about Tony Blair, I mean, he's not someone we can trust, is he? I mean, him and President Bush, I mean, they lied about the weapons of mass destruction over Iraq and caused those tremendous problems of the Iraqi war, which led perhaps to 9/11 ultimately, that led to the problems of Afghanistan, to led to all the problems we've now got happening all through the Middle East. And these things are very, very upsetting, aren't they? To have to think that people like that, you know, what is behind the guy? I mean, he don't do anything unless he gets paid for it. And he's another one that's a great believer in globalism, a great believer in the global economy and these global companies, and even the EU. He I think messed it up for us all, and eventually made it intolerable for the British to remain in the EU because of basically Blair's desire to control people. So obviously someone like him loves the digital ID things. And who's behind him? You know, he makes massive money, doesn't he? He makes massive money from corporate sponsors, as far as I'm aware, things like that. And of course, fraud, of course, is another problem with it. You know, we have so many dangers of identity theft nowadays, and it could get even worse, couldn't it? And we don't really want the state judging us. So look at communist China and how things have been going there. They control the people's lives. They have all sorts of problems in China, of course, where they can completely control people with their sort of lockdowns, as it were. You know, the Uyghur people, for example, are monitored constantly, I believe. And we had a taste of that during lockdown, didn't we? I mean, we were all told to stay at home with a digital society out of control. A dystopian digital society, they could force us to stay at home. We couldn't move, we couldn't catch a bus, we couldn't get a taxi, we couldn't get any petrol, we couldn't walk, you know, anywhere. We'd have any distance, we'd have serious control issues with it, isn't there? But nonetheless, saying that, I do think we do need something Because if we look at the other side of it, and this is what I was kind of talking about, meaning yesterday when I was speaking as well. When we look at the other side, there's such a lot of trouble, particularly online, with people who pretend to be somebody else. Now, I'll tell you where I'm coming from this. I had some of you that come on here might remember this, because I had quite a major community online on my website at psychics.co.uk. Cough UK. We had a huge community on there, with forums and chat rooms, and up until about 2008, when Google decided to take control and gets rid of forums and didn't like chat rooms and more or less stopped all traffic coming to it. See, there's another example of digital control. But we had a fabulous community there, and we'd have literally millions of people coming in on the stats showed millions coming into the site, and many of them sharing the chat rooms where we talk about spiritual things. And it was before the days of this type of ability to be able to stream on YouTube quite to this level. And fabulous place. But the problem is you'd get one or two people, one or two out of many hundreds at a time, you know, who were just mavericks, who would just cause trouble, who would have 4 or 5 identities and come on and stir people up and bully people, all as if someone was being attacked by loads of people and just one person. And they would fake usernames and all the rest of it. I mean, this is the early days of the internet, and things were quite different then, and there's much more safeguards about that. But it just shows me how dangerous that could be, and also misinformation, because I saw it firsthand going on, with so much misinformation being put in and hidden advertising being stuck in there as well. So I worry about how I've seen lovely communities, because it was a lovely community. If anybody remembers it in Delphi chat rooms and the rest of it, put some comments in below if you remember it. But it was a lovely community, but it was soured very often, and soured to the point that we had to sometimes just close it down for periods of time, because we were just getting so many troubles from rival websites and rival chat rooms and all sorts of crazy stuff going on that made you think, oh, is this worth it? So this is a danger that is out there as well, because news can get like that and comments can get like that, and we need something. So so we need to monitor something, but where do we start? And how, like I said, look at the dangers that are involved in it. I mean, I think if we were to do something like this, the first thing we should do is give some digital IDs out. Definitely have some digital IDs. But the first digital ID should be for the politicians, and we should all have access to it, so we can find out things such as their movements, for example, if they've been to a Freemason meeting, or if they've been to a union meeting, or what they've been spending and where, what countries they've been to, if they caught an aeroplane recently, what tax payments have they made, if any, and so on. And maybe we should start with them. What do you think? Start with those guys, and then we can see where it would go. Anyway, so where do I see all this going? And me as a psychic, now what do I think with it all is? Well, first and foremost, we worry about these things, don't we? But it's already happened. It's happened, not just politically, but particularly with the globalist companies, with the advent of the internet. We all give away all our information all the time. When you've logged in here, you've had to log on through your Google account to be able to make a comment here, for example, on if you're not logged in on YouTube, you can't make a comment. So that information has already been given. Okay, it's a little bit of information, but it's a little bit more. And everywhere you go, and every movement, every website you look at, every video you look at, every thing that you purchase is all being gathered, not just by Google, but all the companies are gathering this information, and we don't complain at all. We let them do that. You know, they know more about us than we do. They know more about, for example, if you've got a website, they know more about your business than you do. They know who's come to it, from where, what they searched for, how they got there, and you don't know anything about that. You have to buy into that information, just a tiny bit of that information. It's not yours. So the debate's going to rage, but in my opinion, it's not so much the digital ID that's the problem, it's the use of the information, isn't it? And what information could be attached to that. So I actually think we do need some form of simple identity online, and simple being the operative word here. We need something that we can say, well, we know that that person is giving misinformation. We know that that person is saying something libelous about someone like me, for example. You know, someone could come up and make a whole load of lies about me. Nothing I can do about it because I don't know who they are, where they come from. We have to rely on people's common sense. And that's pretty much thin on the ground, usually, I think, out there, you know. So comments are made and often whole agendas are skewered by people with agendas of misinformation, false identities pouring into Facebook and praising wrong ideas and so forth, or twisting political voters and the rest of it. We need something. We need some way that we can only be limited in how much we can, what identity we have. However, all that information I talked about that's attached to it, that's where things start to go wrong. And I think the problem is I think we've got to start first and foremost by cleaning up before you can do anything like that, if at all you should do anything like that. But before you do anything about that, the first thing we'll do is clean up what we got. Because at the moment, everything I do on the web and everything you do on the web is monitored by someone somewhere with these cookies and things, throw it into the websites and the rest of it. And they know they track you everywhere and every part. That information should not be used. It should not be stored anywhere. The only place it should be stored is locally, so that I can decide whether to use that information or not. So if I'm going to go and buy a new camera to do my YouTube, I don't want to be throwing adverts at me all the time about this camera and that camera and all the rest of it. Not willy-nilly. I want to be able to do it if I say, okay, I will allow this website to suggest cameras to me based upon my browsing activity. And it can temporarily use my information. And then that information is wiped and it cannot be used again. And I'm sure we could technically develop something so that information couldn't be scraped or used in a false way. That way, we're in control. We should have that right now. This is the danger, because we've already given it away, and politicians and the rest can access that information. So a digital ID is not going to make much difference in the end. What is critical is the people's use of the information about me. So this problem is going to rage, and I see it as a big major problem for the future. And I did have a feeling about, I felt that something will come from this in the end, you know. And this is my prediction. I think one day I saw the countries of the world getting together, and this is in a better time. I think it's going to take a long time to get to this. But I see, just as we have kind of bills of human rights and things like that, I feel we're going to have an international bill of digital rights. And I think we really need a call for this. This should be the center of focus, I feel, of the way we should go with our identity online. We need something, a bill of digital rights, which says that a person has the right to retain their data, and that data is not to be used or stored by anybody else without their permission, on a temporary basis only, and that information cannot be shared. We have loose rules about that, but that's the area where they've already taken control, where they've already have our information. And facial recognition, frankly, is also already a digital ID. You can spot who you are, where you are, from a simple camera in the street that's supposed to be monitoring traffic or monitoring a store or whatever. They can track you just from your face. Again, that information needs to be restricted. And that, I think, is the danger. Okay, I've ranted, but it stimulated me. And that's thanks to your comments, guys. So please keep putting your comments here in YouTube, and I'll address some of these issues. And if you find it interesting, please also add your thoughts. What do you think about this? So let's have a look, see what some of you guys think here. Oh, there's one. I'll click that straight away. You know, great idea. So anybody that agrees with me, I can filter the comments now, you see. So anybody says something negative, I can ignore that, can't I? I can just put all the nice ones. This is the problem with control, isn't it? Digital ID will lead to chip-like, what it says in the Bible. Oh, yeah, kind of like the mark of Cain, is that what you're saying? Could that be an implant? Could the mark of Cain be an implant in our brains? Control, control, control. We're just robots now. Yeah, and we can take control, though, can't we? We need to. This is something we need to get our focus right about. This, I'm just clicking randomly. I'm not reading as we go. In the soul world, we use the line segment of the idea as very similar to the golden line because of the color to identity. There is less. Sorry, I don't quite get that one, mate. Sorry. The New World Order. Yeah, I mean, we bandy these words around like New World Order and the rest of it, don't we? But I mean, we need to get back to very much basics now and actually start pushing our politicians. It's quite important. I've spoken to a few politicians in my time, and they say, oh, the problem is people don't tell us about these things and don't tell us what issues to raise in the House. So certainly here in the UK, we can all email our politicians, and even better, which I do, is you write a physical letter and say, look, this is something I'm concerned about. Can you raise it in the House? And your local politician can. And if they're getting enough comments about this, and you might get a Dear John letter back and that sort of, but they need to know. I mean, not all politicians are bad. There's a lot of ordinary guys out there trying to do good as well, So I think we sometimes need to be a bit more active, Let's have a look at some other ones. It doesn't matter how much security you have, but hacks will always find a way. Well, yes, we can say that, but that's always going to be the case in the world. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't try, does it? And I think we can do that. What's this one? Donald Trump has just posted a video declare he will take down the deep state. Yeah, he says that, drain the swamp and the rest of it. But he is onto something with that. And I don't think he's alone. We got politicians here in the UK that believe the same thing. And in Australia, I watch a lot of Australian television because I find it, I like it. I like they're not so woke over there. I think there's a lot to say that we do need to really start really thinking. It's the deep commerce, I think, where the problem is actually, because that's already poisoned us, hasn't it? It's not just politics. Politics are terrifying when they go wrong, but it's just as bad these big corporate companies, tomorrow I could be wiped off YouTube. I could say something, perhaps inadvertently, that doesn't agree with their terms and the rest of it. And next thing you know, you're gone, and you see, and then you have to beg and plead to get back on again. Look at people like David Icke. They have trouble speaking nowadays. I don't necessarily agree with everything he says, but I certainly feel he has the right to say it. And that should always be the case, and, so where do we end it all, eh? The terms left and right need to be banned. Yeah, that's true. The word left and liberal often go together now, don't they? And nobody seems, if you're in the centre ground, I always think you're considered as right, Some things that I think as common sense seem to be considered very right wing, like there's male and female. That's right wing view, So these things are also dangerous too. What countries will suffer of the advancement of ID systems? Well, I think all countries would suffer from it. I think some of the countries that have kind of resisted it, actually, one of the ones that I think has been sensitive about some of this has been India, of all countries, because Modi's a very right-wing sort of minded person too. But I would say he has resisted the big corporate companies going into India and open up the huge stores. So you won't get your Tesco's and your Walmarts and so forth opening in India much, because he says, well, that would damage the ability of the ordinary man to make a small living, a few rupees from selling a few beads on the street sort of thing. That's the way India works. We don't want to corporatize it and turn it into another America. And I think we've all been too willing and eager to allow big companies to dominate our lives. You can't buy anything. Well, you can buy something from your little local shops and things. But, I bought a plug yesterday on Amazon. It was delivered next day. I could have walked down the road and done that, but the hardware stores are gone, actually. But, I mean, it's dangerous, isn't it? The control that's held there by all these and he's talking here, we tend to believe everything we're told. And the problem is there's so much misinformation out there too. All these sort of things that we're interested in with the future of the world and the hidden society, and the deep state, all those type of things, they can also be skewered. People can be filled with all sorts of misinformation, misconceptions. I mean, the spiritual world, all the psychic stuff, so many misconceptions out there, because everybody can claim to be a psychic or a medium, and they might have never even trained. They may never have spent any years in spiritualism demonstrating on platforms. They might have not ever stood in front of a stage and given a mediumistic demonstration. Suddenly they're the medium, So it happens in all fields, mine too, Anyway, that's how it weakens it all, doesn't it? Okay, I was just being corrected there about Modi. Modi is not right wing. It's just an attack from the Western left who think the whole world needs to define their rules. I think I probably would agree with that. Like you said earlier about the left and right business. I think you're right with that. It's very careful what we say. Digital ID, not a good idea till globalist deep state woke corporate elite is exposed and neutralized. Otherwise, guarantee these men will use ID to entrap and control the population. So we need it, I feel, but is it also the thin end of the wedge? And that's where we do need, I think, and I think it will come, this idea I said about a digital, what did I call it? A digital, an international bill for digital rights. That's what I was seeing. I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget it. But I thought that's what we need, and that's what I think will come eventually. And that's what the calling is going to be for, isn't it? I want to go back to the Magna Carta. But, yeah, simpler, easier days, but not many freedoms in that actually either. Really, it was the barons and that pretty much twisted the king's arm to have it. Yeah, it's interesting. Anyway, I think I'm pretty much there, guys, now. So I do ask, if you're new to the channel, please follow it. Give it a thumbs up, put some more comments, those that come regularly. Let's hear your comments. They push me to do new things and new ideas, and I love to see your thoughts. And this is one of the few places we still have a certain amount of ability to communicate between each other without it all being filtered yet, don't we? Okay, so anyway, thank you very much for booking me, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.
They're the real deal, and they're really sweet. Like, you can tell they come from a place of love, which is very endearing.
I know. You know a charlatan, and especially in Los Angeles, when you're meeting shady people. These guys are the real deal, no doubt. Yeah.
Everything about the reading was just spot on, down to the colour. She gave the colour blue, which was very prominent because we wore blue to the funeral, and it was his favourite colour. So I've seen a lot of mediums before. I was very impressed with them.
Very, very good connection. I couldn't believe the connection I got tonight.
We're definitely talking to our loved ones.
Mm-hmm. He said about the photograph, well, I had all them, and he said to me, "You've got that in your bag." And I did. I had everything in my bag, they said. When I went outside for a break, and I said to Carol, they know things that nobody else knows.
And where was I at the back there?
She was spot on. Everything was right. It all meant a lot to me. She had my father's name, everything, things about my brother. There's been problems with my brother. And I'm so glad to hear from both. My father, he was doing this. I'm just glad he's friends with me, because things happened. It's all just a bit emotional.